How do I know if my writing is any good? The answer to that question coming up. So I work with a lot of writers who at some point in the process ask themselves, is this any good? In another video, I will talk about the question of self-doubt. Today, I'm going to talk about the question, what actually makes your writing good? To find the answer to this question, you really need to look at your book from a reader's perspective. And when a reader finishes a book and they recommend it to a friend, why do they say the book is good? Well, it's because it spoke to them. And what does a book that speaks to you, what does that really mean? Well, it really means that it affected you emotionally. So the question, is my book any good? From a reader's point of view, the answer is, did this book affect me emotionally? To start off with, I'm going to give you samples from two different books. So right now, I just want you to ask yourself if you like what you're hearing. Nothing more. Then we're going to analyze both of these samples and figure out what is different about each one of them. But for now, just listen to the sample, read along with me, and ask yourself if you like it, if you think this is good writing. It was just before 10 when I eased my bike into the packed parking lot at the front of the club. Darkness had long descended on the small city of Redemption Hills, California. The sky above was nothing but a blanket of black. Against it, the neon lights gleamed and glowed from the two-story building like beacons of debauchery, flashing over the slew of cars and bikes lined in a row near the entrance. I stopped at the front and planted my boots on the ground so I could roll my bike back. Killing the rumbling engine, I kicked the stand and swung off. The glow of the club lights and the sound of heavy music seeped through the thick block walls. I lit a smoke and strode for the entrance, my boots crunching on the loose gravel as I went. "Mr. Lawson," Colt dipped his head as I approached. So this is a description of a man getting off of his motorcycle and walking into a club. The next sample is also about walking. I tried to find two samples that had something in common, which is actually hard to do. So do you like this description? Before I get too excited about it, maybe I should tell you what book this comes from. This is from Give Me a Reason, a single dad, enemies to lovers romance. So why did I pick this book? Well, I did it quite intentionally because I find that a lot of memoir writing teachers tell their students to give us lots of details, that details make for great writing. Show, don't tell, which is advice that I hate. I think it's terrible advice. This is a wonderful example of show, don't tell. And that's a whole other topic. I'm not going to get into that. There's another video on that. So this is very specific. There are lots of details. It's detail after detail. This is a very detailed account of what an outsider would see. So let me contrast that with a different prose sample, and I'll talk about why the second prose sample is different after I read it to you. The next day, she asked me to take a walk with her on the beach, an unusual move for my mother, who requested a private audience only when she had something very serious to say. I remember it was a sunny morning, mid-July, with a stiff breeze and a hot light, and I remember a feeling of dread and contrition. I was hoping she wouldn't be mad at me. We made our way down the dirt path that led from our house to Meneshma Pond, a blue arc of water at the bottom of the hill, and then we walked for a while in silence. Finally, she said, "I need to talk to you. I'm very worried about your drinking." I said, "I know." I walked beside her, keeping my eyes on my feet in the sand, afraid that if I looked up, I'd bump too abruptly into a truth I didn't want to see. I added softly, "I am too." I could tell from her tone that she wasn't angry, just worried, and I had to admit to her, I was too. So that's from Caroline Knapp's Drinking a Love Story. So I have a question for you, and the question is, which one of these two writing samples affects you emotionally? And I will bet you will probably say the second one. And that's a good answer, probably partly because Caroline Knapp is a critically acclaimed writer, and the first writing sample came from a romance novel. So what is it that makes a second writing sample different? And I'll tell you the answer in a second. But this to me is the key to good writing. This is what separates good writing from mediocre writing. And the difference between these two is that in the second sample, the author puts us inside her head. The writing is not external. It's a mixture of external and internal. In the first sample, It is the version that a camera would record. So first, in the first paragraph, we get visual details. These are things that you can see. Darkness had long descended. The sky was a blanket of black. Neon lights gleamed, flashing over the slew of cars and bikes lined in a row near the entrance. So these are all visual details. The author has set up the scene by describing what we would see. So in the next paragraph, we had action, but yet again, it's still events that one would witness. This is still very external. This is what we would see happening if we had a camera recording this scene. I stopped at the front and planted my boots on the ground so I could roll my bike back. Killing the rumbling engine, I kicked the stand and swung off. So action. So again, this is very external. This is very objective. This is how anyone would describe this scene. Now let's look at the second one. What makes the second one different is that we are inside this narrator's head. She is describing the scene in a way that only she can. This is her point of view. So what do I mean when I say put us inside your head? It's as if you're channeling your thoughts. The thoughts that you have going on in your head, it's as if you have written them down on paper. That's what put us inside your head really means. And when your prose reads like this, reads like an account of the thoughts that went through your head at the time, you were writing really good prose. So we do have some description of what is happening. She does describe the scene. Her mother invites her to take a walk. It's a sunny morning. But then we get her emotional state. I remember a feeling of dread and contrition. I was hoping she wouldn't be mad at me. So those are her thoughts. When you put your thoughts down on paper, you are drawing your reader into your world in a way that simply using description never will be able to accomplish. In this last paragraph, I walked beside her, keeping my eyes on my feet in the sand. Okay, that's external. That's okay. You can have some external. But then we get her internal state. We get her thoughts. Afraid that if I looked up, I'd bump too abruptly into a truth I didn't want to see. I could tell from her tone she wasn't angry, just worried, and I had to admit to her, I was too. So this is not what she's saying. This is not something an outside observer would get from watching the scene. So what you don't want to do is write your scenes as if you were the camera observing this objectively. You want to write the scene from the point of view of your thoughts. You are inside of yourself. That is the point of view. That is the perspective we want to get from the scene. So if I were watching Caroline Knapp and her mother walking, it would never get that Caroline felt that if she looked up, she'd bump too abruptly into a truth she didn't want to see, right? That's not something I would get if I had a camera observing this. Only Caroline Knapp knows this. And that is what you want to do on paper. Basically, you want to channel your thoughts. So you have this mixture. You describe what's happening in the scene, yes, but also take a look at the second sample. There are almost no details. We do not have a detail. I don't even know where she's walking. What does this place look like? I don't know. Did it bother me that I didn't know? It really didn't, because that's not the point. The point is not where she happens to be. The point is this conversation she's having with her mother and how it feels. So people put a lot of weight on descriptive details, on describing setting, on telling us what building you're in, on telling us the way that someone walks, all of this description. And I think that there's way too much emphasis placed on that. I don't need a lot of it. Some books rely on more description than others. That's a stylistic choice. But what you absolutely have to do, no matter what kind of book you're writing, and I mean novel or memoir, is you have to put us inside the narrator's head. So if you're writing a novel and you have an omniscient point of view, you can put us inside all of your characters' heads. I tend to focus on memoir, but the rules often apply for memoir and novel writing. In this case, in memoir writing, you're only going to be able to put us inside your head, because the true story, it's first person. You can't put us inside another person's head. You absolutely can in fiction if you have an omniscient point of view. Okay, just to see if you've been paying attention, I'm going to give you a little bit of a quiz. So obviously I'm going to give you the answer to the quiz, but here's the question. If I give you this picture and I ask you to describe this forest, how will you do that? Beginning writers will do something like the trees arched up toward the heavens, leaf-shaped shadows adorn the forest floor. Okay, fine. But that's not really affecting me. That's kind of flowery prose, and you're describing the forest. You're describing, again, what you see. You can describe what you see, but what is more important is your interpretation of a place or your interpretation of an event. Instead of describing what you see, describe the experience. So that's what I'm getting at. Instead of describing what you saw, what you did in a scene, describe the experience of being there. And that is what makes for good writing. So back to this quiz, back to this question, how would you describe this forest? So instead of describing what you see, let me show you how Bill Bryson does this in A Walk in the Woods. This is how he describes a forest. Woods are not like other spaces. To begin with, they are cubic. Their trees surround you, loom over you, press in from all sides. Woods choke off views and leave you muddled and without bearings. They make you feel small and confused and vulnerable, like a small child lost in a crowd of strange legs. Stand in a desert or prairie and you know you are in a big space. Stand in the woods and you only sense it. They are vast, featureless, nowhere, and they are alive. So he didn't tell me about oak trees. He didn't tell me about cedar trees. He didn't describe the smell of pine. But what has he done? He's given us his version of what it's like to be in the forest. This is his experience. That's what you want to do. You want to describe your experience. You don't want to describe what you saw, what you did. You can, but don't rely on that to make your writing good. What is going to make your writing good, what is often the missing piece for so many writers, is to put us inside your head. Describe what you saw, fine. Describe what you did, fine. But also describe what you thought. That is how you will affect your reader emotionally, and that is how you will ensure that your writing is good. I have lots more tips for you on memoir writing. If you want them, please sign up for my free class. You can find the link in the description right below this video. Also, I'd be grateful if you click subscribe or give me a like. Take care, guys.